The air in courtroom 4B was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet desperation. On one side sat Jeremy Park, a man whose net worth was a headline, his face a mask of bored indifference. Beside him, his mistress Brooke Holloway couldn't contain her smirk. Her victory was a living, breathing thing, perched on her perfectly glossed lips. She openly cradled a hand over her flat stomach, a silent, cruel promise to the woman opposite them. That woman was Camilla Davenport Park, Jeremy's wife. 8 months pregnant, she was the picture of a woman discarded. Her husband's lawyer had just called her claims the hysterical demands of a hormonal, soon-to-be ex-wife. The room expected tears. They expected her to break. But they didn't know Camilla. They didn't see the steel in her spine or the file folder resting beneath her hands. A folder that held a truth far more explosive than a simple affair, a secret that would not just end a marriage, but obliterate an empire. The gavel fell with a sharp crack, a sound that seemed to physically strike Camilla. Judge Margaret Wallace, a woman whose stern expression had been carved by decades of witnessing human fallibility, peered over her spectacles. "Mr. Harrington, you may proceed with the initial settlement offer." Robert Harrington rose a shark in a $4,000 suit. He was Jeremy's lead counsel, a man known for grinding opponents into dust and billing by the minute. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Park, is a man of considerable generosity. Despite the unfortunate circumstances and the emotional nature of Mrs. Davenport Park's claims, he is prepared to offer a one-time payment of $5 million, the deed to the Aspen condominium, and a monthly alimony of $25,000 for a period of 24 months. A murmur rippled through the public gallery, a mix of shock and envy. To them it was a fortune. To Camilla it was an insult spat in her face. $5 million was what Park Global Enterprises spent on a corporate retreat. The Aspen condo was where Jeremy had first taken Brooke. The alimony was a ticking clock designed to run out long before their child would even start grade school. Camilla's gaze drifted from her own lawyer, the calm and collected Audrey Klein, to the opposing table. Jeremy wouldn't look at her. His focus was on a spot on the wall just above the judge's head, as if this entire proceeding was a minor inconvenience, like a delayed flight. But Brooke was looking right at her. The Mistress was a masterpiece of curated perfection. Her blonde hair fell in effortless waves. Her dress was a shade of crimson that screamed for attention, and on her left hand she wore a diamond ring so large it looked like a weapon. It was not an engagement ring. Jeremy was still married after all, but a promise ring, as the gossip columns had gleefully reported, a promise of the future that had been stolen from Camilla. Brooke's smirk widened, and she subtly shifted in her seat, one hand protectively, performatively on her abdomen. The message was clear. I'm next. I'm the new model. The real mother to the Park dynasty. Camilla felt the baby kick a sharp, insistent reminder of the life she carried, the life Jeremy was treating as a line item on a balance sheet. Her own hands, trembling slightly, rested on her swollen belly. She remembered the day she told him she was pregnant. He had been distant for months, a ghost in their 20,000-square-foot mansion. He'd smiled, a brief, fleeting twitch of his lips, and said, "That's wonderful, honey." Later that night, his private jet had flown to St. Bart's. A celebrity photographer, conveniently tipped off, had snapped photos of him and Brooke Holloway, an up-and-coming actress frolicking in the surf. The caption read, "Billionaire Jeremy Park finds true love." Her humiliation was public, deliberate, and brutal. He hadn't just cheated, he had erased her. Now in this cold, sterile courtroom, he was trying to buy her silence, to put a price tag on 8 years of her life, on the child she was about to bring into the world. Mrs. Davenport Park. Judge Wallace's voice cut through her thoughts. Do you and your counsel have a response to this offer? Audrey Klein stood slowly. She was the opposite of Harrington, understated precise her power, lying not in volume, but in substance. We do, Your Honor. We reject it, wholly and unequivocally. Harrington scoffed. On what grounds? This is an exceedingly generous offer for a childless marriage of 8 years. That is incorrect, Audrey said, her voice ringing with clarity. This is not a childless marriage. My client is 34 weeks pregnant with Mr. Park's child. An allegation my client does not dispute, Harrington countered smoothly, and the offer reflects his commitment to that child's future. Does it? Audrey Klein walked slowly towards the witness stand, her eyes locking onto Jeremy. Does it reflect the standard of living? Mr. Park's children are entitled to the private schooling, the trust funds, the security, the legacy. Mr. Park only has one child on the way. Harrington interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. It was the moment, the opening, the tiny crack in the dam of lies. Camilla looked at Audrey, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The steel in Camilla's spine solidified into granite. She felt no fear, only a cold, righteous anger. The room saw a heartbroken, pregnant wife. They had no idea she was a queen on the verge of a checkmate they couldn't even see. That's where you're wrong, Mr. Harrington, Audrey said, her voice dropping, drawing every person in the room into her orbit. That is precisely where this entire proceeding has gone wrong. We are not here to discuss the future of Jeremy Park's one unborn child. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was humming with tension. We are here to discuss the futures of all 3 of them. Brooks' smirk finally faltered. Jeremy's head snapped towards Audrey, his mask of indifference shattering, replaced by a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. The game had just changed. It had started 6 months ago, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A charge on a credit card statement. A florist. Le Fleur Boutique. Camilla didn't think much of it at first. Jeremy was always sending corporate gifts, but the charge was for a specific address, a penthouse apartment in the city's most exclusive new development, a building she had never been to. The note on the order, which she'd been able to coax out of the florist's friendly manager, with a story about a surprise for her husband, was simple. For my one and only, all my love, Jay. It wasn't for her. That single charge was the thread. When Camilla pulled it, Jeremy's meticulously woven world began to unravel. The late nights at the office became clandestine dinners. The business trips to Singapore and Dubai aligned perfectly with Brooke Holloway's Instagram posts from those same cities. The private investigator she hired, a grizzled ex-cop named Frank Miller, confirmed it all within a week. He delivered a manila envelope filled with grainy photos of Jeremy and Brooke kissing on a yacht, holding hands in a park, entering the penthouse apartment. The initial shock was a physical blow. It knocked the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping in the sterile silence of her marble kitchen. She had loved him. She had believed in the life they built, the future they planned. The pregnancy, which had felt like the beautiful culmination of their love, was suddenly tainted a cruel joke played by the universe. For 2 weeks she mourned. She cried until her eyes were raw, and she ate nothing but ice cream. A cliché she couldn't escape. She felt the baby move inside her, and wept for the broken home it would be born into. But then something shifted. It happened on a Tuesday morning. She saw an article online, a fluff piece about Brooke Holloway's meteoric rise. In it, Brooke was quoted talking about her philosophy on life. "You have to be ruthless," she'd said with a dazzling smile. "You see what you want, and you take it. Hesitation is for the weak." The word struck Camilla like a slap. Weak. They saw her as weak. Jeremy with his insulting silence. Brooke with her public parade of affection. They were counting on her to crumble, to take the money and disappear quietly. In that moment, grief turned to resolve. She wasn't weak. She was a Davenport. Her grandfather had built a shipping empire from nothing. Her mother had run a major non-profit. Strength was in her blood. She would not be a footnote in Jeremy Park's biography. She called Frank Miller again. "I don't just want to know what he's doing now, Frank," she said, her voice steady. "I want to know everything. I want to know where every single dollar he's ever earned has gone. I want his entire life, from the day he was born until today, mapped out." "That's a tall order, Mrs. Park. That's digging deep." "I have the resources," she replied coolly. "And you have the time." The investigation moved beyond the affair and into the very foundation of Jeremy's life. Frank was good, better than she could have hoped. He started with Jeremy's past long before he met Camilla, before he was the Jeremy Park. He was born in Seattle to middle-class parents. He attended the University of Washington on a scholarship. He was brilliant, ambitious, driven. But there was a gap, a period of about 2 years after college that was a complete blank. He'd told Camilla he'd been finding himself backpacking through Europe. Frank's report suggested otherwise. There were no passport stamps, no travel records. Instead, he found a work history. A small, now-defunct tech startup in Portland, Oregon. It was there, digging into old employee records and tax filings, that Frank found the first anomaly. A payroll deduction for child support. It was a small amount, and it only lasted for a year before it stopped around the same time Jeremy moved to New York and founded the company that would become Park Global. The payment was made out to a woman named Sarah Jenkins. "Who is Sarah Jenkins?" Camilla had asked, her heart pounding. "That's the million-dollar question," Frank had replied, "or in your case, maybe the billion-dollar one. Finding her is my top priority." While Frank hunted for a ghost in Oregon, Camilla focused on the money. With the help of a forensic accountant, she began tracing the labyrinthine web of shell corporations and offshore accounts that made up Jeremy's empire. He was a master at hiding assets. Money flowed from New York to the Cayman Islands, through Switzerland, and into trusts with names like the Phoenix Fund and the Summit Trust. It was in the records of the Summit Trust that she found the second thread. It was disguised as a charitable foundation for underprivileged American youth. It made a handful of small public donations to legitimate charities to maintain its cover. But the vast majority of its annual disbursements, millions of dollars a year, went to a single recurring wire transfer. There was no recipient name, only an account number at a small credit union in Bend, Oregon, the same town where Frank Miller was currently searching for a ghost named Sarah Jenkins. Camilla felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was bigger than infidelity. This was a secret Jeremy had buried for nearly 2 decades, a secret he was paying millions to keep buried. A week later, Frank called. His voice was different, sober. "You need to sit down, Mrs. Park." "I'm sitting, Frank. What did you find?" "I found Sarah Jenkins. She's a second-grade teacher, lives in a small house, drives a 10-year-old car. Never married." He paused. "She wasn't alone, Camilla." Camilla held her breath. She has 2 kids. Twins. A boy and a girl. They're 17 years old. They're about to graduate high school. The world tilted on its axis. Camilla gripped the phone, her knuckles turning white. "And Jeremy," she whispered. "The kids have his eyes, Camilla," Frank said softly. "There's no mistaking it. They're his." Suddenly everything became clear. The hidden trust, the payments, the erased history. Jeremy Park, the self-made billionaire father of her unborn child, had another family. A secret family. Heirs he had hidden from the world, from his investors, from her. The pain was immense, a fresh wave of betrayal that dwarfed the first. But beneath it, a new feeling emerged, power. She held the truth. She held the bomb that could detonate his entire life. She instructed Frank to arrange a meeting with Sarah Jenkins, not as a threat, but as an ally. She booked a flight to Oregon under an assumed name. She met the woman her husband had discarded. Sarah was kind, weary, and fiercely protective of her children Leo and Lily. She told Camilla the whole story of a whirlwind romance, of promises of marriage, and of Jeremy's sudden, cold departure a week after she told him she was pregnant. The money had started arriving a year later, with a letter from a lawyer demanding her silence in exchange for financial support. She had agreed, wanting a stable life for her children, never imagining the scale of the world Jeremy had gone on to build. Camilla looked at the photos Sarah showed her. A boy with Jeremy's determined jaw, and a girl with his intelligent, piercing blue eyes. They were his. They were real, and they were her leverage, her ace in the hole. Looking at Audrey Klein in that courtroom, Camilla knew that the world was about to meet the Park heirs. The courtroom was a tomb of stunned silence. Harrington's face was a comical mask of disbelief, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at his client Jeremy, whose carefully constructed composure had crumbled into a mosaic of fury and fear. Judge Wallace leaned forward, her expression sharp and demanding. "Counselor." The judge's voice was like chipping ice. "Ms. Klein, I advise you to choose your next words with extreme prejudice. This is a court of law, not a theater for dramatic pronouncements. Substantiate your claim." "Of course, Your Honor," Audrey said, her demeanor unruffled. She walked back to her table and retrieved a thick binder. "Before we address the matter of Mr. Park's other children, I'd like to address the financial disclosures provided by the defendant. They are, to put it mildly, a work of fiction." Harrington found his voice. "Objection. My client has provided a full and transparent accounting of his assets. This is a baseless accusation, a tactic to slander my client and extort a larger settlement." "Is it?" Audrey opened the binder on the lectern. "Let's turn to page 57 of Mr. Park's submitted financials. A holding company named the Summit Trust, registered in the Cayman Islands. It's listed here as a philanthropic vehicle with an estimated value of $15 million dedicated to youth outreach programs. Is that correct, Mr. Harrington?" Harrington glanced at his own papers. "That is correct. It is a charitable trust irrelevant to the marital assets." "Irrelevant?" Audrey's eyebrow arched. "Your Honor, we have subpoenaed the full transaction records for the Summit Trust for the past 10 years. It appears its philanthropic activities are curiously concentrated." She projected a document onto the large screen behind her. It was a bank statement filled with rows and columns of numbers. "For the past decade," Audrey continued, using a laser pointer to highlight a line, "the Summit Trust has made a quarterly wire transfer of $750,000. That's $3 million a year, $30 million over the last decade alone, all directed to a single account at the Bend Community Credit Union in Oregon. Jeremy Park went rigid. The color drained from his face. Brooke, sitting beside him, looked utterly confused. Her brow furrowed. She glanced from the screen to Jeremy, a hint of unease creeping into her eyes. This wasn't part of the plan. The plan was a quick, clean divorce, a big check, and her ascension to the throne. This was messy, complicated. A single sustained youth outreach program, no doubt, Audrey said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps you could enlighten us, Mr. Harrington. What is the name of this remarkable, well-funded organization that has been the sole beneficiary of Mr. Park's offshore generosity for 10 years? Harrington was scrambling. He leaned over, whispering furiously to Jeremy, who shook his head, his jaw tight. Your Honor, my client's charitable donations are private. Ms. Klein is on a fishing expedition attempting to distract from the matter at hand. The matter at hand, Mr. Harrington, is the full extent of the marital assets and Mr. Park's financial obligations. Judge Wallace stated, her gaze fixed on the screen. And I, for one, am now very interested in this particular youth program. Ms. Klein, do you know the name of the recipient account holder? This was the moment of no return. Camilla's heart hammered against her ribs. She watched. Jeremy saw the cornered look in his eyes, the same look she'd seen in a news photo of him when a rival corporation had attempted a hostile takeover. He was a predator, but now he was the prey. We do, Your Honor, Audrey said clearly. The account is registered to a private citizen, a woman by the name of Ms. Sarah Jenkins. The name hung in the air, meaningless to everyone in the room, except for two people. Camilla saw a muscle twitch in Jeremy's cheek. He was a statue of controlled rage. Harrington tried to recover. And who is Sarah Jenkins? A director of a charity. A program administrator. Not quite, Audrey said, turning her gaze from the lawyer to Jeremy himself. She spoke to him directly now, her voice a piercing arrow. Isn't that right, Mr. Park? Sarah Jenkins isn't a program director. You know her, don't you? You worked with her at a company called Innovatech Solutions in Portland nearly 18 years ago. Jeremy's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of his table. He said nothing, his silence a deafening confession. You knew her very well, in fact. Audrey pressed on, her voice relentless. So well that when you left Oregon to seek your fortune in New York, you left her behind. You also left behind the consequences of your relationship. Objection! Harrington roared, jumping to his feet. This is character assassination. It has no bearing on these proceedings. On the contrary, Your Honor. Audrey shot back, her voice rising with controlled power. It has every bearing, because the millions of dollars funneled through the Summit Trust were not charity. It was hush money. It was a secret, undeclared maintenance fund, a fund to support the children Mr. Park abandoned. The gallery erupted in gasps. The press reporters were typing furiously, their faces alight with the scandal of a lifetime. Brooke Holloway looked at Jeremy, her face a storm of confusion, betrayal, and dawning horror. The man who had promised her the world had a secret history, a secret life he had never mentioned. A life that came with children. Judge Wallace banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this court. When the room quieted, she fixed her steely gaze on Audrey Klein. Counselor, you have made an extraordinary allegation. You had better have more than bank statements and innuendo to back it up. Audrey smiled a thin, grim line. "As it happens, Your Honor, I do." She turned toward the courtroom doors. "The prosecution calls its first witness, Miss Sarah Jenkins." The heavy courtroom doors swung open, and a woman stepped through. She was the antithesis of everyone in the room. While Brooke was dressed in vibrant, attention-grabbing crimson, this woman wore a simple navy blue dress that looked like it came from a department store. Her brown hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her face, though lined with the quiet worries of a single mother, held a profound, unshakable dignity. She clutched her handbag with both hands, her knuckles pale, but her steps were steady as she walked toward the witness stand. This was Sarah Jenkins, the ghost from Jeremy Park's past made flesh. Jeremy looked as if he had seen an apparition. All the blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, pale sheen. He stared at Sarah, the woman he had discarded like a rough draft, the woman he thought money had erased from his life forever. After Sarah was sworn in, Audrey Klein approached her with a gentle demeanor that stood in stark contrast to her sharp cross-examination style. "Ms. Jenkins," Audrey began, her voice soft, "could you please state your relationship to the defendant, Mr. Jeremy Park?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes flicking to Jeremy for a split second before settling on Audrey. "We were in a relationship," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "We met when we both worked at Innovatech in Portland. We were together for almost a year." "And what happened at the end of that year, Ms. Jenkins?" Sarah's hands tightened on her purse. I found out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed. We had talked about a future together, about marriage. When I told him, he seemed happy at first. But a week later he was gone. He told me he was moving to New York to start a new business. He said he would send for me once he was settled. "Did he ever send for you?" Audrey asked. "No," Sarah whispered. The word was a small, painful punctuation mark on a long-forgotten story. "He stopped answering my calls. A few months later, I received a letter from his lawyer. It said Jeremy would provide financial support on the condition that I never contact him or his family again, and that I never publicly identify him as the father. You were pregnant with his child, and he sent a lawyer to silence you." "Yes." Harrington stood up. "Objection. This is ancient history. My client made arrangements to provide for his child. He was a young man trying to start a business. He did what he thought was best." "What he thought was best for himself," Audrey countered, not missing a beat. "Overruled," Judge Wallace said, her eyes glued to Sarah. "Continue, Ms. Klein." "Ms. Jenkins," Audrey said, "Mr. Harrington stated that his client provided for his child, singular. Is that accurate?" Sarah looked down at her hands, a flicker of pain crossing her face before it was replaced by a fierce maternal pride. "No," she said, her voice stronger now. "That's not accurate. I was pregnant with twins." Another wave of shock rippled through the courtroom. Brooke Holloway let out a small, involuntary gasp. Twins. Not one forgotten child, but two. The scale of the deception was growing exponentially. "Twins," Audrey repeated, letting the word sink in. "And did Mr. Park know you were expecting twins?" "Yes. I told him after my first ultrasound, just before he left." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had known. He had known, and still he had vanished. "And for the last 17 years, you have raised these children by yourself." "Yes. They are my entire world." "The payments from the Summit Trust," Audrey continued. "That money was the child support Mr. Park paid you, correct?" "Yes. It arrived every 3 months, like clockwork. The lawyer told me it was all contingent on my complete and total silence." "So you upheld your end of the bargain," Audrey stated. For 17 years you kept his secret. You raised his children in anonymity while he became one of the most famous billionaires in the world. You never spoke to the press. You never contacted him. Why? Why did you keep silent for so long? Sarah finally looked at Jeremy. Her gaze wasn't filled with hatred, but with a deep, bottomless well of disappointment. For them, she said simply. For Leo and Lily. I didn't want them to grow up in a circus. I didn't want them to be defined by a father who didn't want them. I wanted them to have a normal, happy life. The money helped me give them that. Stability, good schools, a safe home. It was never about me. So why speak now, Ms. Jenkins? What has changed? Audrey asked the crucial question. Sarah turned her attention back to Audrey, and then for a moment her eyes met Camilla's across the courtroom. A flicker of understanding, of solidarity, passed between the two women, the wife he was discarding and the woman he had thrown away. I was contacted by Mrs. Davenport Park's legal team, Sarah said, and I saw the news. I saw him with a new woman while his wife was pregnant, and I saw him trying to deny his own child the same way he denied mine. I realized my silence wasn't protecting my children anymore. It was enabling him. It was allowing him to hurt another woman, another child. My children are almost adults now. They deserve to know who their father is, and more importantly, he needs to finally publicly acknowledge that they exist. The moral weight of her testimony settled over the room. She hadn't come for money or revenge. She had come for justice, for recognition. She had come to stop a cycle of selfish cruelty. Harrington saw his case crumbling. He had to discredit her. He rose for cross-examination, his face a sneer. Miss Jenkins, you've lived quite comfortably on my client's money for 17 years, haven't you? $3 million a year is a lavish lifestyle for a school teacher in Oregon. The money was never for me, Sarah replied, calmly, unintimidated. It was put into a trust for the children, for their education, their health care, their future. I live on my teacher's salary. I've saved every penny for them. How convenient, Harrington scoffed. And isn't it also convenient that you've appeared now during a high-profile divorce, teaming up with the jilted wife to extort an even bigger payday? Objection, Audrey called out. But Sarah answered before the judge could rule. I have never met Mrs. Davenport Park before last month, she said, her voice unwavering. And I am not here for a payday. I am here to tell the truth. Your client has 2 children, 2 wonderful, intelligent 17-year-old children who deserve to be acknowledged. Harrington paced before her. You claim these are my client's children. Where is the proof you have a birth certificate? Of course, Sarah said, but the father's name is listed as unknown. That was part of the agreement. So you have no concrete proof, Harrington declared triumphantly, turning to the judge. Your Honor, this is a baseless claim from a woman trying to cash in. Audrey Klein remained perfectly still. Proof is not an issue, Your Honor, she said into the charged silence. We have already filed a motion to compel a DNA test, which I am certain will confirm paternity. She paused, then turned toward the back of the courtroom. But I believe we have a more immediate visual form of evidence. She raised her voice slightly. Ms. Jenkins, are your children here today? Sarah's gaze followed Audrey's to the courtroom doors. Yes, she said, her voice filled with a mother's love and fear. They are. Your Honor, Audrey announced, her voice resonating with theatrical power. I present to the court Leo and Lily Jenkins Park. On Audrey Klein's cue, the courtroom doors opened for a second time. Every head, including Judge Wallace's, swiveled to face the entrance. The reporters in the gallery craned their necks, cameras clicking, despite the bailiff's warnings. Two figures stood silhouetted in the doorway. As they stepped into the light of the courtroom, a collective gasp swept through the room. They were teenagers, a boy and a girl, both tall and poised with an air of quiet confidence that belied their age. But it wasn't their youth that was so shocking. It was their faces. The boy Leo had Jeremy Park's exact jawline and his dark, intense hair. He possessed the same focused, piercing blue eyes that had graced the covers of countless business magazines. His expression was a mixture of anxiety and grim determination. The girl Lily was a softer echo, but the resemblance was no less startling. She had the same high cheekbones and the same intelligent set to her eyes, a mirror of her father in his university photos. Her posture was ramrod straight, a silent defiance against the man who was staring at them as if he'd seen his own ghost. They walked down the central aisle, their mother Sarah watching them from the witness stand with tears welling in her eyes. They didn't look at the lawyers, the judge, or the gawking crowd. Their eyes were fixed on one person, Jeremy Park. The scene was devastatingly cinematic. Jeremy, the titan of industry, the man who controlled markets with a single phone call, was rendered utterly powerless. He was frozen, a statue, carved from shock. The carefully constructed walls of his life were not just cracking. They were being pulverized into dust before his very eyes. Brooke Holloway let out a small, strangled sound. She stared at the teenagers, then at Jeremy's ashen face, then back again. The future she had envisioned, a life of luxury as Mrs. Park, mother to the sole heir, evaporated. She was not the successor to the Queen. She was just another woman in a line of women Jeremy had used and deceived. And these teenagers, they were not just a complication. They were a claim. A legitimate, living, breathing claim on the man, the name and the fortune she had so ruthlessly pursued. Her smirk, the one she had worn like armor all morning, was gone, replaced by a mask of raw, unfiltered panic. Harrington, for the first time in his storied career, was speechless. His objections, his legal maneuvering, all seemed absurd in the face of this undeniable visual truth. How could he argue against paternity when Jeremy Park's own face, 25 years younger, was staring back at him from two different people? Leo and Lily stopped at the front of the courtroom, standing behind the prosecution's table, a silent show of solidarity with Audrey and Camilla. They didn't look angry. They looked resolved, as if they had spent their whole lives preparing for this moment. Camilla watched them, and her heart, which had been a knot of anger and pain, felt a surprising pang of empathy. These were not props in her legal strategy. They were children. Children who had grown up with a hole in their lives, shaped exactly like the man sitting across the room. Her fight was no longer just for herself and her unborn baby. It was for them, too. For the years of birthdays, he missed the school plays. He never attended the fatherly advice he never gave. Judge Wallace, recovering from her own shock, banged the gavel. Order. Order. Her voice was strained. She looked at the two teenagers, then at Jeremy, and her expression hardened. The law was the law, but this was a matter of fundamental human decency, and she was witnessing a profound failure of it. Mr. Park, the judge said, her voice low and dangerous. Would you care to comment on this development? Jeremy opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Sarah, the woman he had paid to disappear. He looked at Leo and Lily, the children he had treated as a financial liability. He looked at Camilla, his pregnant wife, whose quiet strength had orchestrated this entire public demolition of his life. He was surrounded, trapped by the consequences of his own choices. Audrey Klein let the silence hang for a full minute, allowing the impact of the children's presence to saturate the room. Then she spoke. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm, but ringing with finality. "The defense has claimed that Mr. Park's offer is generous. We now see it for what it is. It is an attempt to silence yet another woman and discard yet another child. It is a pattern of behavior. Mr. Park does not build families. He acquires them and disposes of them when they become inconvenient." She gestured towards Leo and Lily. "These are his first heirs. My client, Camilla Davenport Park, carries his third. The initial settlement offer is not just rejected, it is an offense. We will be submitting a revised claim that accounts for all of Mr. Park's obligations, past, present, and future. We will be seeking a settlement that provides security not just for Mrs. Davenport Park and her child, but one that rectifies 17 years of negligence and abandonment towards his other children." Harrington finally stammered. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We need time, a recess to process this new information." "A recess?" Judge Wallace's voice was laced with contempt. "Mr. Harrington, it seems your client has had 17 years to process this information. A recess is granted. This court will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. "And Mr. Park," she said, her eyes boring into him, "I suggest you get your house in order, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a Category 5 hurricane has just made landfall." As the judge swept from the room, chaos erupted. Jeremy sat paralyzed as reporters shouted his name. Leo and Lily stood their ground, a silent, powerful indictment. Camilla rose slowly, her hand on her belly. She didn't look at Jeremy. Her gaze was on Leo and Lily. She gave them a small, sad smile, a look of acknowledgement. In that moment, they were not rivals for a fortune. They were siblings, all of them. The boy in the court, the girl by his side, and the baby in her womb, bound together by the same man's profound and devastating selfishness. The smirk was gone from the mistress's face, replaced by the terror of a woman realizing she'd bet everything on a man who was a king of lies. The battle was far from over, but the war had just been won. The recess felt like a detonation. Jeremy Park was swarmed by his legal and PR teams, who formed a human shield to hustle him into a private conference room. The look on his face was no longer shock. It was the cold, calculating fury of a cornered predator. In the hallway, Brooke Holloway confronted him, her voice a sharp, hysterical whisper. "Twins. 17-year-old. Twins, Jeremy. You told me you had no baggage. You told me she was a bitter, childless woman you were trying to get rid of." "Keep your voice down," he snarled, grabbing her arm. "This is a setup, a shakedown. They're trying to ruin me." "They are ruining you," she hissed back, yanking her arm away. "And what about me? What about us? You promised me a future. Was that a lie, too? Was I just another secret you were planning to pay off and bury?" The question hung in the air, poisoned with dawning realization. She saw the answer in his eyes. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. The disdain on his face was enough. To him, she was an asset that had just become a liability. Her purpose to be the beautiful, fertile young replacement for his aging wife was now null and void. He already had heirs. He didn't need a new one from her. "Get in the car and go back to the penthouse," he commanded, his voice devoid of any affection. Don't talk to anyone, especially not the press." He turned his back on her and disappeared into the conference room, leaving her standing alone in the whirlwind of his imploding life. The promise ring on her finger suddenly felt cold and heavy, a shackle rather than a prize. Meanwhile, in another much calmer room, Camilla met her stepchildren for the first time. Audrey Klein and Sarah Jenkins stood by, giving them space. "I'm Camilla," she said softly to Leo and Lily. "I'm so sorry you had to do that. It wasn't fair to put you on display." Leo, his jaw tight, shook his head. "It's okay," Mom explained. "We knew it was the only way he would ever have to look at us." "He never once tried to see you." Camilla asked the injustice of it, a fresh wound. Lily spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. "No. We wrote him letters when we were younger. We found his office address online. We never knew if he got them. He never wrote back." The simple cruelty of it stole Camilla's breath. This wasn't just negligence. It was a deliberate, sustained act of erasure. The meeting was brief, a quiet acknowledgement of their strange new reality. As they were leaving, Sarah Jenkins pulled Camilla aside. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it was humbling. "You didn't have to include them. This could have just been about you. You gave my children a voice." "He wronged all of us, Sarah," Camilla replied, placing a hand on the other woman's arm. "His debt is to all of us." That evening, as the news of the Park secret Heirs dominated every media outlet, sending Park Global's stock into a nosedive, Camilla received an unexpected visitor at her lawyer's office. It was Brooke Holloway. She looked nothing like the smug, confident woman from the courtroom. Her makeup was streaked with tears. Her crimson dress looked garish under the fluorescent office lights, and the giant ring was gone from her finger. She looked desperate, stripped of her power. "What do you want?" Audrey asked, her tone glacial. "I want to help you," Brooke said, her voice trembling. "He's going to run." Camilla and Audrey exchanged a look of skepticism. "Why would you help us?" Camilla asked. "This morning you were smirking at me from across the courtroom." "This morning I thought I had a future." Brooke shot back, a flash of her old fire returning. "Now I know I was just a placeholder. He used me to humiliate you. And now that this is all out, I'm disposable. He told me so himself." She took a shuddering breath. "He's not just going to fight you in court. He's liquidating. He's moving assets, real untraceable assets, to a non-extradition country. He has a jet fueled and waiting. He's planning on leaving you his unborn child and his new children with a mountain of corporate debt and hollowed-out shell companies." This was the second twist, the one they hadn't seen coming. Jeremy wasn't going to fight. He was going to flee. A scorched earth policy. If he couldn't have it all, he would burn it all to the ground, so no one else could have it either. "Why are you telling us this?" Audrey pressed her lawyerly suspicion on high alert. "What's in it for you? A deal." Brooke set her eyes hard. "And revenge. I want to see his face when he realizes I'm the one who took him down. He thinks I'm a stupid actress he can throw away. He's about to find out how wrong he is." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small encrypted flash drive. "This is everything. For the past 6 months I've had access to his personal laptop, his study. I wasn't just his mistress. He was grooming me to be the new corporate wife. He showed me things trying to impress me. I made copies. Offshore account numbers not on any official disclosure transfer authorizations. He pre-signed the flight plan for his escape route correspondence with his offshore bankers. It's all there. She slid the flash drive across the table. It was the key to his entire, hidden financial kingdom. "I want a settlement," Brooke stated. "A small one, enough to disappear and start over. And I want full immunity from any potential fraud charges. In exchange, I'll testify. I will tell the court under oath that he is a flight risk and is actively hiding assets with the intent to defraud his family and the court." Camilla looked at the flash drive, then at the woman in front of her. She did not like Brooke Holloway. She might never forgive her for the humiliation, for the pain, but she recognized the look in her eyes. It was the look of a woman who had been used, underestimated, and discarded. It was a look she now knew well. The two women Jeremy had pitted against each other, the wife and the mistress, had become the most unlikely and most dangerous of allies. "Give her the deal, Audrey," Camilla said, her voice firm. "Let's end this." The next morning, Courtroom 4B was a tinderbox of anticipation. The press gallery was overflowing. Jeremy Park arrived looking haggard but defiant, flanked by a grim-faced Robert Harrington. He clearly believed this was just another business negotiation, a problem to be solved with money and intimidation. He had no idea he was walking into a perfectly laid trap. As soon as Judge Wallace took her seat, Audrey Klein stood. "Your Honor, we have a new motion to file effective immediately. We have credible evidence that the defendant, Mr. Park, is a significant flight risk and is actively engaged in the process of concealing and transferring marital assets overseas with the intent of evading the jurisdiction of this court." Harrington jumped up. "Objection! This is outrageous slander of the highest order." "Is it, Mr. Harrington?" Audrey's voice was cold as steel. "Or is it the truth?" The prosecution calls Brooke Holloway to the stand. If the appearance of the twins had been a shockwave, this was a nuclear explosion. Jeremy's head whipped around his face, contorting in a mask of pure disbelief and rage, as he saw Brooke, dressed in a conservative grey suit, walk calmly to the witness stand. The look he gave her was murderous. She met it with a calm, icy stare. Brooke's testimony was devastating. Guided by Audrey, she calmly and methodically laid out Jeremy's entire plan. She presented the documents from the flash drive emails to Swiss bankers' instructions for liquidating portfolios, the finalized flight plan for a private jet bound for the United Arab Emirates, scheduled to depart that very night. Each piece of evidence was a nail in Jeremy's coffin. Harrington's cross-examination was feeble. He tried to paint Brooke as a scorned lover, seeking revenge. But her evidence was too precise, too damning. The pre-signed transfer authorizations authenticated by a handwriting expert overnight were irrefutable proof. By the time Brooke stepped down, Jeremy Park's fate was sealed. Judge Wallace's face was thunderous. "Mr. Park, do you have anything to say in response to this testimony?" "To these documents." Jeremy stood his expensive suit, seeming to hang off him. "It's all lies," he snarled, his voice cracking. "She's a vindictive, gold-digging—" "That is enough!" The judge's voice boomed, silencing him instantly. "I have seen and heard enough." She made her ruling on the spot. "Effective immediately, I am signing a court order to freeze every known asset of Mr. Jeremy Park and Park Global Enterprises, both domestic and international. The defendant is to surrender his passport to the bailiff at this moment. You are not to leave the state of New York without the express permission of this court." The sound of Jeremy's empire grinding to a halt was a deafening silence. The game was over. He had lost. The final settlement, arbitrated over the following weeks, was a complete capitulation. The judge, incensed by Jeremy's deceit, made an example of him. 40% of his total verified assets were placed into a trust for Camilla and her unborn child, a daughter she would later name Grace. An equal 40% was placed into a separate, irrevocable trust for Leo and Lily to be managed by their mother, Sarah Jenkins. This amount not only secured their futures, but served as retroactive compensation for 17 years of paternal abandonment. Brooke Holloway received a one-time sealed settlement of $5 million. Ironically, the same amount Jeremy had first offered Camilla, and quietly disappeared from the public eye. The remaining 20%, along with the crumbling remains of his debt-ridden company, were left to Jeremy. He was a billionaire, reduced to a mere multi-millionaire, a king dethroned and disgraced his name forever, synonymous with scandal. A month later, in a quiet cafe far from the glare of the media, Camilla met with Sarah, Leo, and Lily. The awkwardness was still there, but it was overshadowed by a strange sense of kinship. "He called us," Lily said, stirring her hot chocolate. "Once?" He tried to apologize. "What did you say?" Camilla asked gently. Leo looked up, his blue eyes, so like his father's but so much kinder met hers. "I told him we didn't need an apology. We needed a father, and it was about 17 years too late for that. We wished him well and hung up." The finality of it was both sad and freeing. Camilla reached across the table and put her hand over Sarah's. "We're going to be okay," she said, a statement of fact, not hope. Sarah squeezed her hand back, a smile finally reaching her eyes. "I know." Camilla looked at these two teenagers, her daughter's half-siblings, and at the strong woman who had raised them. They were not the family she had ever imagined, but they were family nonetheless, forged in the fires of one man's lies. Out of the ashes of the Park Empire, a new legacy was just beginning. One built not on wealth or power, but on resilience. Truth and the unexpected bonds between the women he had tried and failed to break. And so the story of Jeremy Park serves as a powerful reminder that truth has a way of rising to the surface no matter how deeply it's buried. It's a story about how the arrogance of power is no match for the courage of those who have been wronged. The mistress's smirk in the courtroom was not the sign of a victory, but the prelude to a spectacular downfall orchestrated by the very women he underestimated. Camilla, Sarah, and even Brooke, in her own act of self-preservation and revenge, showed that when pushed to the brink, the alliance of the scorned can topple any empire. What do you think was justice truly served? Who do you sympathize with the most in this complex web of deceit? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
Failing to frame the pregnant wife, Mistress slaps her. The millionaire husband stops her just in time. A whirlwind of secrets, power, and impossible dreams threatens to tear one family apart until an unexpected hero steps forward. In this riveting tale, Cinderella isn't just a fairy tale figure. She's a modern woman caught in a web of decay. It's spun by a jealous mistress, determined to seize fortune and status for herself. When a ruthless slap nearly crushes Cinderella's spirit, a protective millionaire husband intervenes just in time. Love, betrayal, and redemption clash beneath the glittering lights of high society. Brace yourself for a roller coaster of emotions, hidden agendas, and courageous hearts that refuse to surrender. This is a story you'll never forget. Cinderella was not her real name, of course. The parents had named her Cynthia Elaine Robles, but all her life, friends and family teased her affectionately by calling her Cinderella. At first, it was a playful nickname because she was gentle in spirit and forever loved to dance. As years passed, however, it took on a second meaning. She grew up surrounded by the gloom of a broken family and, At times, found solace imagining she was the Cinderella from fairy tales, who would eventually find her own bright future. But this is not the simple story of a girl in rags who meets a prince at a ball. Instead, this story unfolds in the lavish domain of a sprawling mansion located just outside the city of Greenwick Hills. Here, Cynthia lived with her father, Hector Robles, a self-made millionaire known for his philanthropic ventures, and a man whose heart had grown heavy with grief after losing his wife, Cynthia's mother, to a sudden illness. Hector was determined to keep his daughter safe, showering her with love and everything money could buy. Yet all the wealth in the world couldn't fill the void left by her mother's passing. When Cynthia was 18, her father remarried. In a swirl of public fascination, paparazzi cameras, and society gossip, Hector wed Naomi Bordeaux, a younger woman from a prominent family. Naomi arrived like a whirlwind, wearing designer gowns to breakfast and criticizing household staff for the slightest lapses. She brought with her an air of ostentation that might have dazzled many, but for Cynthia, it was jarring. Overnight, the quiet mansion became a stage for Naomi's endless parties and fancy gatherings. Despite Naomi's flamboyance, Cynthia tried to welcome her new stepmother with an open heart. She was prepared to share her father's attention and do whatever it took to adapt. But from the outset, Naomi saw Cynthia not as a sweet, gracious daughter, but as a threat. After all, Cynthia stood to inherit a substantial fortune when she turned 21, and Naomi wanted to ensure none of it slipped through her fingers. Determined to cement her place in the family's wealth, Naomi behaved more like an adversary than a maternal figure. Still, Hector seemed oblivious. He was enthralled by Naomi's charms, perhaps hoping that this second marriage would bring him some solace and happiness. He was too busy navigating his booming businesses and new philanthropic projects to notice the subtle ways. Naomi undermined Cynthia's confidence and stifled her joy. On the surface, the household maintained a veneer of order and politeness. Staff continued to follow Cynthia's soft-spoken directions, but they also glanced nervously at Naomi, keenly aware of the newcomer's foul temper and manipulative nature. While Naomi's petty malice simmered in the background, Cynthia found pockets of comfort in her life. She had a steadfast friend in Christine Delgado, a childhood companion from a neighboring estate. Christine was a brilliant law student with a knack for sniffing out injustice. Christine's unwavering support provided Cynthia with the courage to keep her head held high, even as Naomi's underhanded schemes began to intensify. Little did Cynthia know, a storm of colossal proportions was about to break over her life. The gentle girl who once believed wholeheartedly in fairy tale endings would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. No magic wands or fairy godmothers would appear, only real, human choices made in the face of deception and greed. In the midst of it all, a powerful man would eventually step forward in her defense, unveiling a truth far more dramatic than any story Cynthia had ever read. As the years progressed, the tension between Cynthia and Naomi grew more palpable. Cynthia, now 20, had blossomed into a kind-hearted young woman pursuing her passions. She volunteered at a local children's center, teaching dance classes and organizing small recitals to raise funds for disadvantaged youth. Her heart was all about giving back, an echo of her late mother's empathetic spirit. Naomi, for her part, was unraveling under the weight of her own envy. Although Hector was a generous husband, lavishing her with diamonds, exotic vacations, and the prestige of being Mistress Robles, she could not rid herself of the gnawing worry that Cynthia, with her 21st birthday just months away, might overshadow her in the household and gain full control over a sizable trust fund. From the outside, Naomi was always dazzling. At every gala, she appeared in shimmering gowns, smiling for cameras, entertaining CIPs. But behind closed doors, she seethed whenever she saw Cynthia elegantly descending the marble staircase in a modest dress, her natural grace and kindness shining like an inner light. Naomi felt threatened, and that feeling fed her compulsion to manipulate everyone around her, including the household staff. To further complicate matters, Hector's business empire had doubled in scope over the last few years. He was on the brink of finalizing a new deal with major international partners. This deal meant Hector spent countless hours traveling and hosting late-night meetings, which left Naomi with ample opportunity to reign unchallenged over the mansion. One afternoon, Naomi conceived of a cunning plan. She persuaded Hector that Cynthia was no longer safe in her old bedroom because of an alleged structural issue, an excuse she manufactured from thin air. Naomi insisted it was urgent to move Cynthia into a smaller room in a distant wing of the mansion while the repairs were carried out. Hector, worrying for his daughter's safety, readily agreed. And so Cynthia found herself uprooted from the spacious suite she had cherished since childhood. She did not complain, though she felt an odd pang in her chest to leave the room that still housed so many of her mother's memories. In truth, the forced relocation was a small piece of Naomi's plan to ostracize Cynthia within her own home. Naomi put on a show of playing the concerned mother figure, pretending to watch over Cynthia's well-being. She assigned a new maid, Yvette, to look after the young woman. Yvette was a quiet, timid figure who walked on eggshells around Naomi. She followed every command diligently, no matter how unethical or biased it appeared. Amid these rearrangements, a new figure appeared on the stage, Jonathan Harrington, a suave young businessman who had partnered with Hector on a philanthropic project. Handsome, well-spoken, and hailing from an old money family, Jonathan was instantly drawn to Cynthia's warmth. He began spending time at the mansion, discussing future charity events and working closely with her to plan fundraisers. Their shared passion for helping children bonded them quickly, forming a bond of respect and camaraderie that lit a small spark in both hearts. Naomi watched them warily. Jonathan's interest in Cynthia stung her like an open wound. While Naomi had married Hector for security, she still craved validation from any desirable man within arm's reach. But Jonathan seemed uninterested in her carefully orchestrated flirtations, focusing instead on Cynthia's ideas and intelligence. Naomi's jealousy evolved into outright contempt, fueling her determination to destroy Cynthia's reputation if that's what it took to maintain her power. Soon, Naomi's cunning began to expand beyond the walls of the mansion. She started planting subtle rumors among the city's elite, whispering that Cynthia was manipulative, that her sweet demeanor was a carefully staged act. At gala dinners, Naomi would turn to her circle of well-coiffed friends and say, with affected concern, "I love Cynthia, but I worry about her ambition. She seems so eager to prove something." Those who didn't know Cynthia well began to accept Naomi's words at face value. A shadow of suspicion formed over Cynthia's otherwise spotless image, and Cynthia, unsuspecting, continued her life as usual. She danced with children at the community center, planned her birthday celebration with Christine, and worked alongside Jonathan on philanthropic projects. She never imagined that the rug could be pulled out from under her so swiftly, that the stage was being set for a terrible betrayal, one that would test her courage and integrity to their limits. Naomi's grand plan hinged on a singular ambition, turning Hector and the rest of society against Cynthia, leaving Naomi as the sole heir to the family's fortune and the apex of the Robles' social circle. She orchestrated each step carefully, using Yvette as her inside informant and an unsuspecting scapegoat if things went wrong. In the weeks leading up to Cynthia's 21st birthday, Naomi put her manipulative talents to work. She started by implementing strict rules that subtly restricted Cynthia's freedoms. For example, she insisted that Cynthia should stop visiting the children's center alone, claiming it was too dangerous for someone of her status. Naomi also pressured the staff to keep an eye on the young woman's activities, logging her comings and goings in a small notebook. Her excuse? For Cynthia's own safety. But in reality, these logs were meant to create a paper trail Naomi could twist to her advantage, painting Cynthia as reckless or irresponsible if the opportunity arose. One of Naomi's most cunning moves involved intercepting Cynthia's mail. Using the staff under her control, she gained access to letters, bills, and invitations addressed to Cynthia. Whenever something that could potentially damage Cynthia's reputation landed in their mailbox, like a misaddressed letter containing financial details about the trust fund, Naomi quickly claimed it. Accidentally fell into her hands. Then she would twist those details and spread half-truths to undermine Cynthia's character. She even tried to sabotage Cynthia's credit by ordering items in her name and returning them, incurring fees. Though minor in the grand scheme, these small pricks of sabotage were carefully orchestrated acts of war in Naomi's mind. Meanwhile, Christine Delgado noticed odd discrepancies in Cynthia's day-to-day life. Christine was no fool. Law school had taught her to question everything. Why was Cynthia suddenly missing important invitations to charitable events? Why had she started receiving notices for credit card bills she never opened? Christine confronted Cynthia with her suspicions, but Cynthia believed it must all be some big misunderstanding. She couldn't fathom that Naomi might be orchestrating a deliberate campaign to erode her reputation. Then came a pivotal moment, the annual Winter's Grace fundraiser at the Greenwick Grand Hotel. This event was a social apex, attended by the city's wealthiest families, celebrities, and politicians. Hector Robles was slated to give the keynote speech, and both Cynthia and Naomi had parts to play. Cynthia was to perform a choreographed dance with the children from her center, and Naomi would handle public relations and host the after-party. 2 days before the event, Naomi orchestrated a staged scene in the mansion's study. She asked Yvette to slip one of the precious Robles family heirlooms into Cynthia's purse. The plan was simple. Naomi would feign alarm and accuse Cynthia of stealing the heirloom. Naomi knew her stepdaughter's heart was pure and that the charges would be outrageous. But she hoped the shock and scandal would create doubt among onlookers and tarnish Cynthia's name just enough to disrupt her close bond with Hector and Jonathan. On the night of the so-called theft, Naomi put on a theatrical show, searching the entire house with exaggerated alarm. She declared that a diamond-studded necklace, one of Hector's beloved gifts, had gone missing. Staff members, wide-eyed and concerned, helped comb through each room while Cynthia stood on the sidelines, entirely baffled by the sudden panic. "I saw Miss Cynthia in the study earlier," Yvette said, her voice trembling with faux apprehension. She glanced at Naomi, who gave a subtle nod of approval. She was near the jewelry display. Cynthia's eyes widened. "I've never gone near that jewelry display," she protested calmly, though her heart was pounding. "Why would I even touch your necklace?" Naomi wore the mask of a grieving victim. "I don't want to accuse anyone wrongly," she said, her hand pressed to her chest. "But we must check everything. This necklace is priceless. My husband entrusted it to me." She directed a staff member to search Cynthia's belongings. Within minutes, the missing necklace was found in Cynthia's purse, exactly as Naomi had arranged. A hush fell over the staff. Christine, who happened to be visiting that evening, looked mortified, her suspicion growing by the second. Meanwhile, Cynthia was rendered speechless. She frantically tried to explain that she had no idea how the necklace got there. Yet the cold expressions from Naomi and the staff's uncertain glances weighed heavily in the air. Naomi nearly smirked at her success. The first step of her plan appeared to be unfolding perfectly. But fate had other designs. Hector, who had arrived home early from a business trip, walked into the hallway at the height of the commotion. He found Cynthia clutching the necklace, tears in her eyes, and Naomi standing before her like a righteous avenger. His confusion and concern were evident as he listened to the claims. Though Naomi's performance was convincing, Hector's paternal instinct did not waver. He did not want to leap to conclusions. After all, he had known Cynthia's heart since she was a child. For the moment, the matter ended with Hector demanding that everyone remain calm until he could investigate the situation thoroughly. Naomi had hoped for immediate outrage, but Hector's cautious approach dampened her victory. Still, the plan was in motion. Cynthia was now under suspicion, and Naomi's next steps could be even more destructive. The morning after the staged theft, tensions remained high in the Robles mansion. The staff tiptoed around, unsure whom to believe. Some had always admired Cynthia's kindness. Others felt compelled to align with Naomi, anxious not to lose their jobs. Hector locked the necklace in his study and prepared to question everyone involved, determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. But Cynthia, emotionally drained and mortified, chose a different path. She slipped out of the mansion early, heading to the local cafe where she often met Christine. Christine was already seated in a corner booth, looking up at Cynthia with worried eyes. "You look exhausted," Christine said gently, as Cynthia slid into the seat opposite her. "I got your text. Tell me what happened in detail, no omitting anything." Cynthia sighed, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. She recounted the entire ordeal: Naomi's hysterics, Yvette's planted suspicion, the discovery of the necklace in her purse. Her voice shook as she asked, "Why would they do this to me? Is it just jealousy? Am I really that threatening to Naomi?" Christine's expression hardened with conviction. "Naomi is threatened by your share of the inheritance. She's trying to cast doubt on your character. If she can show you're dishonest or unstable, she might be able to control or diminish your claim when you turn 21. Cynthia's eyes filled with tears, but not just tears of hurt, tears of exasperation. "I've never even wanted the money for myself. All I want is to continue my mother's philanthropic work. My father knows that." She paused, voice trembling. "But does he still trust me?" Christine reached across the table and gently squeezed Cynthia's hand. "He loves you. That's different from trusting you, but love has a way of guiding people to do the right thing eventually. Plus, he's a smart man. Naomi might fool some people, but Hector knows who you are at your core. The question is, how do we prove Naomi's setting you up?" Before Cynthia could respond, Jonathan Harrington walked in. He spotted them, gave a small, concerned smile, and approached. "Christine texted me last night." "I'm so sorry, Cynthia," he said, sliding into the booth beside her. "I've known you for months now, and I know you'd never stoop to stealing jewelry." A wave of relief washed over Cynthia, though she felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Thank you for believing me." I just don't know how to get out of this mess." Jonathan frowned. "What if we find evidence that Naomi orchestrated this? Yvette might be the key. She seems terrified of Naomi. Maybe she knows more than she's letting on." Christine nodded. "I had the same thought. If we can persuade Yvette to speak the truth, it could turn things around. Yet persuading Yvette to risk her livelihood and face Naomi's wrath was no small task." Jonathan offered to help, but Cynthia was hesitant. She already felt fragile enough. Confronting Naomi or Yvette directly terrified her. Naomi was a seasoned manipulator with a cunning streak. Cynthia feared that if she made one wrong move, Naomi would twist it against her in a more vicious manner. For now, they agreed on a cautious approach. Christine would quietly probe the household staff for information and keep tabs on Naomi's next steps. Jonathan would remain supportive, offering his business connections if needed, and Cynthia, she decided she would try to maintain a semblance of normalcy, continue her volunteering, and wait for an opportunity to prove her innocence. Deep down, however, Cynthia was haunted by a nagging fear. Naomi was powerful, connected, and unscrupulous. The woman had already proven her willingness to lie and manipulate. If Naomi could orchestrate a stolen necklace fiasco so convincingly, what else might she be plotting? The unknown possibilities cast a gloomy cloud over the days leading up to Cynthia's milestone birthday. Amid the uncertainty, though, a new resilience began to awaken in Cynthia. She realized she had to rise above her own fears, if not for herself, then for her late mother's legacy and for all the children who depended on her work at the community center. The path ahead looked treacherous, but Cynthia was no shrinking violet. She would press on, holding on to the belief that truth, once uncovered, could be her greatest ally. And so, while Naomi refined her next move, Cynthia and her few loyal companions braced themselves for a battle they had no choice but to fight. Despite the cloud of suspicion around her, Cynthia tried to focus on the upcoming Winter's Grace fundraiser. She trained daily with the children for their dance performance, determined not to let personal turmoil overshadow the charitable cause. The children, blissfully unaware of adult politics, brought a sense of joy and normalcy to her life. Their laughter and excitement reminded her that hope still existed, even in the darkest of times. Meanwhile, Naomi found new ways to tighten her hold. She had a keen sense of when and where to strike, and she now aimed to discredit Cynthia on a larger scale. Naomi had found out through Hector that a journalist from a reputable magazine was writing a feature on the Robles family's philanthropic endeavors. This journalist, Marcus Bellamy, was scheduled to attend the fundraiser and interview the family. Naomi seized the opportunity. She invited Marcus to a private luncheon at the mansion a few days before the fundraiser, ostensibly to help him understand the Robles family dynamic. What he didn't know was that Naomi intended to plant seeds of suspicion against Cynthia. Throughout the luncheon, Naomi waxed lyrical about her philanthropic heart and her concern for Cynthia, who she painted as an emotional, possibly troubled young woman. She meticulously dropped hints about the incident with the missing necklace, carefully omitting mention of any proof of Cynthia's innocence. To maintain an air of fairness, Naomi would sigh dramatically and say, "I love her as my own, but I worry for her." So much pressure can do strange things to a young person. Marcus, in search of a compelling story, couldn't help taking notes. His questions to Naomi revealed a curiosity about the rumored animosity within the family. Sensing an angle, he pressed Naomi for details. Naomi feigned hesitation, as though reluctant to air the family's dirty laundry. In reality, she was thrilled that her narrative was taking shape in a journalist's notebook. After the luncheon, Naomi felt invincible. She was certain that a published piece questioning Cynthia's integrity would damage Cynthia's reputation beyond repair. At best, it would cause enough scandal to isolate Cynthia socially. At worst, it might push Hector to reconsider the terms of Cynthia's inheritance. Naomi saw this as a victory on the horizon. Yet, in the background, Christine quietly gathered information. She studied the staff's behavior, noticing that Yvette appeared increasingly uneasy. On one occasion, Christine overheard Naomi scolding Yvette for some trivial error. Naomi's words were laced with venom. "You'll do as I say, or you'll regret it." Yvette's pale face told Christine everything she needed to know. The young maid was deeply entangled in Naomi's schemes and terrified of the consequences. But how to get Yvette to talk? Christine debated confronting her directly. She toyed with the idea of offering Yvette legal protection or threatening Naomi with a lawsuit for defamation. But everything had to be carefully orchestrated. One misstep could spook Yvette and drive her deeper into Naomi's clutches. Jonathan, on the other hand, made it his mission to stay close to Cynthia. He feared that in a moment of despair, Cynthia might collapse under the weight of the false accusations. He accompanied her to rehearsals, offered moral support, and continued brainstorming ways to expose Naomi. Their shared moments, though often overshadowed by stress, took on a quiet intimacy. They discovered they could trust each other completely, an unspoken bond that was growing steadily, perhaps into something more than friendship. As the days to the fundraiser ticked by, Cynthia found an unexpected wellspring of determination. She refused to let Naomi's campaign destroy her spirit. Late at night, she practiced extra hours with the children, perfecting the dance routine. She wrote personalized thank you notes to donors, ignoring the rumors swirling around her. Her focus on kindness and community work shone like a small candle, defying the darkness that Naomi was so diligently weaving. In a household where every whisper could be a lie and every gesture might be weaponized, Cynthia's steadfast belief in goodness was both her shield and her sword. Little did she know that this unwavering spirit would soon be tested to its breaking point, and that Naomi's next move would bring the conflict to a dramatic crescendo, one that would forever alter the family's course. The Winter's Grace fundraiser was more than just a charity event. It was a spectacle of high society, complete with ice sculptures, crystal chandeliers, and a red carpet entrance for the city's elite. Held in the grand ballroom of the Greenwick Grand Hotel, every detail exuded opulence, from the live orchestra playing melodic tunes to the elegantly dressed guests swirling in conversation. Cynthia arrived early, guiding a group of excited children through the backstage area. She wore a simple but stunning midnight blue gown, her hair swept up in a graceful chignon. The children, dressed in white and silver costumes, glowed with anticipation. For them, the night was about dancing and receiving applause for their hard work. For Cynthia, it was also about reclaiming her dignity. She felt a surge of nerves, wondering whether the rumors Naomi had spread had reached the ears of potential donors. In the main hall, Naomi glided among the guests in a dazzling champagne-colored dress. Her diamond jewelry caught the light with every step she took. She greeted old acquaintances with air kisses and polite smiles, deftly weaving a tapestry of social connections around her. With practiced skill, Naomi steered conversations to highlight her philanthropic efforts and subtly cast doubt on Cynthia's capabilities. She was determined to dominate the spotlight, ensuring that any mention of Cynthia came laced with insinuation. Hector stood by the entrance, greeting prominent donors and business associates. He wore an air of forced cheerfulness. The tension in his eyes was palpable. He had yet to fully unravel the mystery of the missing necklace, and the unpleasant suspicions weighed on him. Still, he put on a brave face, determined to make this event a success for the Children's Center and his other charitable causes. Close by, Jonathan Harrington mingled with fellow entrepreneurs, always keeping one eye on Cynthia. He admired her resilience. Even under the scrutiny of these powerful, sometimes judgmental guests, she conducted herself with grace and a genuine smile. If only the world could see the purity of her heart, all of Naomi's slander would vanish like mist in sunlight. The orchestra struck its opening notes. Guests drifted toward their seats, preparing for the evening's presentations. Eventually, Hector took the stage to deliver his welcome address, emphasizing the importance of community support. Then he introduced the children's dance, calling Cynthia to join them on stage. Cynthia took a deep breath, stepping into the spotlight with the children around her. Their performance was magical. The dance told a story of hope, of children finding warmth and joy in a cold world. Cynthia moved with an elegance that left the audience spellbound. She guided the little ones with gentle nudges and smiles, ensuring they were synchronized and confident. By the time the final note faded, the crowd erupted into applause. For a brief, shining moment, all of Cynthia's anxieties melted away. Yet, backstage, a tempest brewed. Naomi had arranged for Yvette to slip away from the hotel and return to the mansion. Her orders were clear. She wanted Yvette to retrieve something from Cynthia's room, something that would cast Cynthia in a grievous light if revealed at the fundraiser. Naomi had discovered an old journal in which Cynthia had, years ago, written about her struggles with depression after her mother's death. Naomi planned to twist those vulnerable confessions into proof of Cynthia's instability, exploiting her emotional turmoil as evidence that Cynthia was prone to deceit and theft. But Naomi's plan took an unexpected turn. Christine, who had grown suspicious of Naomi's comings and goings, happened to notice Yvette leaving the hotel in haste. Christine slipped away from the fundraiser and followed the maid, curious about her errand. When Yvette arrived at the mansion, Christine waited in the shadows, watching carefully. Through a window, she saw Yvette rummaging through Cynthia's belongings until she found the worn, leather-bound journal. Christine's heart sank. She quickly deduced Naomi's intention to humiliate Cynthia in the most personal and devastating way. Back at the fundraiser, Cynthia was greeted by enthusiastic compliments and appreciative donors. Yet Naomi smiled coldly, a cat-like triumph glimmering in her eyes. She knew that once Yvette returned with the journal, she would have all the ammunition she needed to publicly shame Cynthia. Naomi imagined unveiling a few pages under the guise of concern right in front of Marcus Bellamy, the journalist. She could already picture the headlines questioning Cynthia's mental state and reliability. As the event progressed, the tension mounted. Cynthia felt the unease in the air, but couldn't pinpoint its source. Jonathan pulled her aside, quietly praising her performance and suggesting they speak privately after the event. His voice was kind, his gaze encouraging. Cynthia nodded, a flicker of hope warming her heart. But little did she know that at any moment, Naomi planned to strike like a snake, determined to deliver the final blow that would tarnish Cynthia's reputation forever. Christine quietly followed Yvette back to the hotel, determined to intervene. If Naomi managed to reveal Cynthia's journal, the damage would be immense. Those personal confessions were never meant to be paraded in front of society's elite. Christine's mind raced. She knew that confrontation with Naomi might be risky, but letting her proceed unchallenged was not an option. However, Christine was not alone in her determination. When she re-entered the hotel's back corridor, she nearly collided with Jonathan, who had also been searching for Naomi's staff. Christine explained to him in hushed tones what she had witnessed at the mansion. Jonathan's face darkened with concern. "We have to stop her," he said firmly. "Do you have any idea how we can turn the tables?" Christine bit her lip. "We could expose Naomi's real motives by proving she orchestrated the theft of the necklace. If Yvette confesses, we'll have more than enough evidence to show Naomi's pattern of deceit." But Yvette is too scared to talk. Jonathan glanced at his watch. The final speeches of the evening were about to begin. "Maybe we can leverage the fact that Naomi is about to do something illegal, or at least ethically appalling, reading someone's private journal without consent. That's a violation of privacy. If we convince Yvette that she might face legal repercussions, she might come clean." They found Yvette in a side hallway, clutching the journal in trembling hands. She looked like a frightened rabbit cornered by wolves. Christine approached her gently. "Yvette, listen. This can't go on. You know Naomi is using you. If you help her ruin Cynthia's life, you could be held legally accountable as an accomplice. This is serious. Tears welled in Yvette's eyes. I have no choice. She threatened to have me fired. My mother needs medical treatment, and my paycheck goes to her care, Naomi said. She trailed off, unable to finish. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Jonathan softened his voice. I understand you're in a terrible position, but the truth is, Naomi doesn't care about you. She'll discard you the moment you're no longer useful. If you help us, we can protect you. I have resources and connections. We can ensure Naomi can't just sweep you aside. Yvette blinked through her tears, torn between fear and the longing to be free from Naomi's grasp. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, as if resigning herself to the inevitable. I'll do it. I'll tell the truth about the necklace and the journal. But please help me find another job, somewhere far from here. Christine gave her a reassuring smile. That's a promise. Armed with Yvette's cooperation, Christine and Jonathan formulated a quick plan. They would wait for Naomi to make her move, then catch her red-handed with the journal and present Yvette's testimony. But they needed Hector's presence, and possibly Marcus Bellamy's, so there would be reputable witnesses when Naomi's deceit came to light. As Yvette slipped the journal discreetly back into her coat, Christine whispered, "We'll be right behind you. Don't hand that journal to Naomi until we give you the signal. We want everyone to see who's really behind this." The trio parted ways, each feeling the weight of what was about to unfold. Yvette would head toward the ballroom, with Christine and Jonathan shadowing her from a safe distance. Once Naomi presented her false story to the crowd or the journalist, they would confront her. The stakes were high. Either Naomi's plan would shatter, or her cunning would outmaneuver them yet again. Cynthia, meanwhile, stood at the edge of the ballroom, blissfully unaware of the machinations happening in the corridors. She was chatting with some patrons who praised her performance. Soon, Hector would give his closing remarks, and the event would wind down. The night seemed poised to end on a note of success for the fundraiser, but for Cynthia and Naomi, the final act of this drama was just about to begin. As the Winter's Grace fundraiser neared its finale, the atmosphere in the ballroom hummed with contentment and the afterglow of charitable generosity. Hector climbed the stage for his concluding speech. He expressed gratitude to all donors, praising Cynthia's dedication and acknowledging Naomi's contributions as well, though his gaze flickered with uncertainty when he mentioned her name. In the midst of Hector's speech, Naomi positioned herself near Marcus Bellamy, the journalist, and signaled Yvette with a subtle nod. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Without hesitation, Yvette approached Naomi with the leather-bound journal tucked under her arm. Naomi's eyes shone with triumphant malice as she accepted it. Marcus, sensing an unfolding drama, leaned closer. "What's that?" he asked, curiosity laced with intrigue. Naomi feigned reluctance, clutching the journal as though it were a burning coal. "It's something of Cynthia's," she said softly, "a personal diary. I've just learned that it might contain some troubling entries. I'm torn, Mr. Bellamy. On one hand, I want to respect her privacy. On the other, I feel it's my duty to ensure the truth comes out, especially since there are rumors about a stolen necklace." Her voice trembled artfully, as if she truly were a mother figure worried about a troubled child. Marcus raised his eyebrows, hooking onto her every word. Nearby guests also began to perk up, sensing the shift in energy. In that tense moment, Jonathan and Christine stepped forward, flanking Naomi. Christine's voice cut through the chatter, calm but firm. "Naomi, what exactly are you planning to reveal about Cynthia?" Naomi, caught off guard, turned to face them. She glared at Yvette, who stood a few feet away, her posture stiff and anxious. "I'm only sharing the truth," Naomi said, in a hollowly righteous tone. "I have reason to believe Cynthia's mental state is affecting her moral judgment." "This journal, that journal was stolen from Cynthia's room," Jonathan interrupted, his tone sharper than usual. You're invading her privacy and using her personal confessions against her. Isn't that precisely the sort of behavior you warned the staff never to engage in? The surrounding crowd, including Hector and Marcus Bellamy, now shifted their attention fully to this confrontation. Heads turned, whispers swirled. Naomi tried to maintain composure. "I'm only doing what any concerned stepmother would do," she insisted, pressing a hand dramatically over her heart. "I discovered this journal by accident. Yvette found it tucked in Cynthia's purse. She thought it was relevant to the stolen necklace situation. That was the cue." Christine nodded to Yvette, who stepped forward, trembling but resolute. The maid cleared her throat. I need to speak the truth." Her voice was so soft that Christine offered her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Yvette's eyes flicked nervously around the room. "Miss S. Naomi forced me to plant the family necklace in Miss Cynthia's purse." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, including Hector, whose face drained of color. Cynthia, who had been near the edge of the crowd, felt her world tilt. Jonathan gently guided her closer, giving her a supportive arm to cling to. "That's not all," Yvette continued, tears building. "Miss S. Naomi also ordered me to bring Cynthia's personal journal here tonight. She planned to show it to you, Mr. Bellamy, and claim that Miss Cynthia's entries prove she was unstable or deceitful." Yvette paused, glancing at Naomi, who looked livid. "But it's not true. Miss Cynthia is innocent. She never stole anything." Naomi's face contorted in rage. "This is a ridiculous lie," she spat, turning to Hector. "You can't possibly believe this, darling. She's just a disgruntled maid. She must be in league with Cynthia to embarrass me." But Naomi's protests fell on deaf ears. Hector's gaze, heavy with shock and dawning realization, never left his wife. "Naomi," he said quietly, "tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been orchestrating all this from the start." Naomi's mouth opened and closed, struggling for an explanation, but the silent condemnation from everyone around her spoke volumes. Marcus Bellamy, always the journalist, took a step forward. "Is there any proof to corroborate Yvette's statement?" Christine pulled out her phone. "I recorded a conversation with Yvette earlier." She pressed play, and the muffled audio revealed the maid admitting to planting the necklace at Naomi's request and retrieving the journal under Naomi's orders. The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Hector looked stunned, while Cynthia felt an overwhelming mix of vindication, relief, and heartbreak. Her stepmother, the woman who was supposed to be a maternal figure, had sought to destroy her. Naomi, seeing her carefully built facade crumble, let desperation take over. Her next move would push the evening's drama to a new level of intensity, one that no one, not even Cynthia, saw coming. Naomi's rage finally boiled over. With all eyes upon her and her schemes laid bare, she snapped. Like a coiled viper, she spun toward Cynthia, eyes brimming with malevolence. "You ungrateful little wretch," she hissed. "I gave you everything, and you dare to turn everyone against me?" Cynthia stood rooted to the spot, tears welling in her eyes. She wanted to speak, but her voice remained trapped in her throat. The stinging realization that Naomi had never cared for her, never wanted to be a true mother figure, seared her heart. Naomi lifted her hand, and before Cynthia could react, she struck her across the face with a sharp, resounding slap. The slap might as well have been thunder, cracking the tense silence in the ballroom. Cynthia stumbled backward, pressing a shaking hand to her burning cheek, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Gasps and cries rang out among the onlookers. Christine froze in horror, Jonathan's fists clenched in anger. But it was Hector who lunged forward, his face contorted with both fury and protective instinct. He grabbed Naomi's wrist, preventing a second blow that seemed moments away from landing. The strength and speed of Hector's reaction revealed the paternal love he held for Cynthia. "How dare you!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent room. "You will never lay a hand on my daughter again." Naomi tried to yank her wrist free, but Hector's grip was iron. In that instant, the polished, charming facade Naomi had presented to the world was shattered. Her eyes glistened with tears of defeat and rage, scanning the crowd of horrified faces. Everyone witnessed the truth. She was the manipulator, the aggressor, the one who had undermined the family's unity for her own gain. Security personnel and event staff surged forward, uncertain of what to do next, but ready to intervene if more violence ensued. Marcus Bellamy hurriedly jotted notes and snapped a photo with his phone. He knew he was witnessing a scandal that would shock the community. Christine rushed to Cynthia's side, enveloping her in a comforting embrace. Jonathan was also there, softly touching Cynthia's shoulder, his concern evident. Still gripping Naomi's wrist, Hector glared at his wife. "I want you out of here," he said, his voice cold with conviction. "Do you understand? Out of this hotel, out of my home. We will discuss formalities later, but for now, leave. You've disgraced this family and yourself." Naomi, tears streaking her face, realized she had lost. She tore her arm free from Hector's grasp. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the ballroom, her high heels echoing on the marble floor like a funeral march. A wave of hushed whispers followed in her wake. The scene she left behind was one of disbelief and uneasy relief. Cynthia trembled, her cheek throbbing, but the pain was overshadowed by a dizzying surge of emotional release. She was free from the looming threats and manipulations. Tears slipped down her face, mingling with a weak, relieved smile. Christine and Jonathan guided her off to a quieter corner, where a hotel staff member offered her ice for her cheek. Hector stepped to the microphone again, obviously shaken. He cleared his throat, struggling to regain composure. "I apologize," he said, addressing the stunned audience. "It appears we've had a personal crisis. Please, let's continue the evening's mission to support these children. We'll deal with this family matter privately." His voice wavered, but the audience offered a respectful round of applause, sympathetic to the explosive situation. But even as the official portion of the fundraiser resumed, no one could ignore what had just happened. Conversations buzzed about Naomi's downfall, about the newly revealed fact that she had orchestrated a vile plan against her stepdaughter. And in one electrifying moment, the tension that had built up for months had erupted only to subside into a strange, uncertain calm. For Cynthia, the sting on her cheek paled in comparison to the betrayal that battered her heart. Yet she also felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her father had stood up for her at last, unveiling Naomi's true colors to everyone present. Jonathan and Christine had orchestrated a bold plan to expose Naomi's lies, and Yvette had found the courage to speak the truth. That night marked the end of an era, the era in which Cynthia was the helpless Cinderella, locked away and despised by a cruel mistress. She had her father's love and protection now, and she had allies who would stand by her in the darkest storms. The road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time she felt the shackles of Naomi's tyranny fall away. The next chapter of her life would be hers to claim, with the promise of healing and hope guiding her forward. The days after the fundraiser were a whirlwind of media frenzy. Headlines blazed with Naomi's public humiliation, labeling her the architect of a cruel plot. Photos and eyewitness accounts of the slap spread quickly, fueling the city's chatter. Hector issued a terse statement, urging respect for his family's privacy. Yet reporters swarmed the mansion gates, shouting questions whenever Cynthia ventured outside. Though cleared of wrongdoing, she found the sudden spotlight overwhelming. She clung to the children's drawings and letters of support, reminders of her purpose beyond scandal. Inside the mansion, Relief mixed with lingering shock. Without Naomi's controlling presence, the household staff breathed more easily. Christine offered legal guidance to Hector, and Jonathan stood by Cynthia's side, a silent pillar of comfort. Their presence helped Cynthia cope with the sudden media onslaught. Meanwhile, Naomi retreated to a penthouse downtown, already contesting her eventual divorce settlement. She tried planting new rumors, but few believed her. Yvette, under Christine's protection, found safer employment. Finally free, she refused all attempts to coerce her into silence. Despite the chaos, a fragile sense of peace emerged. Cynthia reclaimed her childhood room, intent on honoring her mother's memory through renewed volunteer work and daily acts of kindness. Though the betrayal still stung, she felt hopeful for the first time in years. The mansion's dark shadows receded little by little, replaced by the promise of fresh starts and honest connections. A few days after the scandal, Hector asked Cynthia to join him in the garden once, her childhood retreat with her mother. Fresh lilies bloomed along the gazebo, a quiet nod to her late mother's favorite flower. Looking weary but resolute, Hector confessed, "I'm sorry for failing you. I was blind, wanting a complete family so badly that I ignored the signs. Naomi betrayed us both." Cynthia gripped his hand. "I understand, Dad. We can't change the past, but we can move forward." They strolled, recalling happier times, her mother's warm smiles, playful afternoons chasing butterflies. Each memory reminded them of the love they once shared as a family. Hector then revealed he was filing for divorce and revising Cynthia's inheritance, so she'd have complete control once she turned 21. Touched, Cynthia accepted with a tremulous smile. "I'll use it wisely in Mom's memory." They embraced, letting forgiveness outweigh bitterness. Leaving the gazebo, father and daughter stepped into the mansion side by side, hearts lighter, certain that honesty and unity would guide the family's future. Cynthia's 21st birthday dawned with warm sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows. Instead of a grand affair, she chose a simple, heartfelt gathering in the mansion's main hall, decorated in soft pastels, fresh flowers, and a few cherished photos of her late mother. Friends and staff arrived early, eager to celebrate a day that felt more like a homecoming than a party. The children from the community center performed a short dance, delighting everyone with their energy. Christine helped coordinate the event, ensuring every detail glowed with sincerity. Even Yvette quietly joined, smiling shyly at Cynthia. When Jonathan presented a bouquet of lavender roses matching Cynthia's dress, her cheeks warmed with an unspoken tenderness. Hector, looking rested after their recent trials, offered a moving toast, praising his daughter's resilience. Tearfully, Cynthia cut a small, elegant cake, wishing for hope and peace in the days ahead. As she danced with Jonathan in the softly lit hall, Cynthia felt the weight of old burdens fade. No longer trapped by Naomi's manipulations, she embraced a future guided by genuine bonds and compassion. The mansion that once echoed with discord now filled with laughter and renewed promise, marking the dawn of a new, happier chapter in Cynthia's life. A month after Cynthia's birthday celebration, the Robles mansion settled into a tranquil new rhythm. The once constant press attention had faded, allowing Cynthia and Hector to resume more regular routines. Yvette's replacement, a cheerful housekeeper named Rosa, filled the halls with a sense of optimism. Even the household staff, who had weathered Naomi's storm, seemed lighter in spirit, relieved to be free of daily manipulations. Naomi, now barred from the mansion, had escalated her legal demands, attempting to claim a generous share of Hector's wealth. She threatened to release incriminating, though fabricated information to tabloids if she did not receive a substantial settlement. Hector's lawyers, however, were well prepared. They possessed a trove of evidence of Naomi's deceit, including recorded testimony from Yvette. The truth had a powerful way of repelling false allegations. Moreover, Christine Delgado took an active role behind the scenes, advising Hector's legal team. She carefully compiled timelines of Naomi's misconduct, pairing them with text messages, audio recordings, and testimony from staff. Each piece of evidence chipped away at Naomi's case. In the end, Hector's lawyers negotiated a settlement that fell far below Naomi's initial demands. While she received a modest sum to expedite her departure, it wasn't enough to sustain her luxurious tastes indefinitely. During this period, Cynthia spent her time and resources remodeling part of the mansion into a creative art space for children. The new Elaine wing, named after Cynthia's mother, included rooms for dance lessons, art workshops, and small concerts. Generous donations poured in from sponsors who admired Cynthia's resilience and genuine philanthropic spirit. She also extended partnerships to other community organizations, forging a network of support for underprivileged youth. Word of Cynthia's dedication and warmth spread beyond the city limits. Invitations arrived for her to speak at charity luncheons and youth events. She approached each opportunity with humility, focusing on the children's needs rather than her own dramatic backstory. Yet many attendees were curious about her personal journey, seeing in her a modern-day Cinderella who had overcome adversity without losing her compassionate nature. Meanwhile, Jonathan Harrington assumed a quieter, more intimate role in Cynthia's life. He proved indispensable in handling the expansion of her projects, connecting her with philanthropic circles eager to invest in community building. In the evenings, after long days of planning and budgeting, Jonathan and Cynthia would stroll through the garden, discussing not just business, but also sharing hopes for the future. Their relationship blossomed into a tender romance, one nurtured by mutual respect and a shared vision of helping others. On a crisp autumn morning, they stood together at the threshold of the Elaine wing, preparing for the official ribbon-cutting ceremony. Hector was inside, greeting guests and donors, while Christine helped coordinate last-minute details. Cynthia held the large, ceremonial scissors, her hand brushing lightly against Jonathan's. In the hush before the festivities, he smiled at her, eyes brimming with admiration. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said. Cynthia felt her heart swell with gratitude for her father's love, for Christine's unwavering friendship, for Jonathan's gentleness, and for the simple fact that she had found her voice amidst the chaos. With a confident snip, she cut the ribbon, signaling the start of a new era. Applause erupted, and children rushed in, eager to explore the bright, art-filled space that would soon hold their laughter and creativity. And in that moment, the shadows of Naomi's treachery felt like a distant memory. Cynthia realized she had claimed her story, forging a life guided by compassion and resilience. No longer was she the timid Cinderella waiting for rescue. She had rescued herself by choosing truth, by trusting her allies, and by never letting bitterness eclipse her generous heart. The future, however uncertain, now seemed filled with brilliant possibilities waiting to be embraced. Thank you for journeying with us through the twists and turns of Cynthia's modern Cinderella story. In a whirlwind of betrayal, heartbreak, and final redemption, she emerged not just a survivor, but a champion for truth and kindness. We witnessed how one determined spirit, supported by loyal friends and family, can stand strong against the most cunning manipulations. And in the end, good prevailed not through magic wands or fairy godmothers, but through courage, integrity, and steadfast love.